So I went away and did the deep dive and the TED talk and the YouTube video. I read the white paper for Bitcoin and I came back and I was like, this is brilliant and I want to get involved. But I will say that if you can direct a theater show, you can absolutely put on an event.
Start with the resources that you have at your disposal.
You don't want to align your brand with questionable companies and questionable people.
I'm Argeaux, and for 10 years I worked as a digital transformation consultant for some of the most prestigious firms in the world. I then made the leap into AI and Web3 as an ecosystem builder. I quickly climbed up the ranks, became a subject matter expert, and built a solid network. Join me fortnightly as I interview some of the most interesting minds in the space on what it takes to have career success. Whether you're a newbie or an industry veteran, come and learn what it takes to level up your career.
Hello and welcome to another episode of AI Web3 Careers. I'm Argeaux, an ecosystem builder, and today I'm joined by my good friend Kaitlin. Kaitlin is the founder of Crypto Mondays London, a monthly sold-out event keeping you up to date with all things Web3 and digital assets. In addition to that, she also works hard at Blockbeat, which is a digital vertical that sits underneath the City AM newspaper banner. Kaitlin, welcome.
Hi.
How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. Excited to chat.
No, it's great to have you on board. Yeah. First question, I know that you have a background in theatre. Can you comment on this and how that has shaped your approach to Web3?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was a theater girl, still am really, but for most of my life. I was directing shows in London. I have had a theater company for 13 years and directed updated classics. I had a team of 3. And basically in 2017, a really good friend of mine came to me and said, I'm interested in starting this blockchain company. I want you to come and help me with the clients because I'm not good with people. He was like the CTO. And so I was like, you've got the wrong person. I'm a theater person. I don't know anything about tech. And he said, listen, go away and I'll give you a week. Go away and do some research. Come back, tell me what you think. So I did. I went away and did the deep dive and the TED talk and the YouTube video and, read tons of information. I read the white paper for Bitcoin. And I came back and I understood none of it. And I came back and I was like, this is brilliant and I want to get involved. And so sort of after COVID came, that was 2020, that was sort of what made me decide to completely pivot into the Web3 space. But I will say that if you can direct a theater show, a 3-week theater show, you can absolutely put on an event. So there are a lot of transferable skills there. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Not least of all, being front facing and dealing with people, because attendees at an event are almost the same as an audience for a theater show. So you've got to know how to compromise, I guess, a little bit. Like you've got to put on a good show, something that you want. It's important to you that you're passionate about, but also that's going to appeal to your audience or your attendees. And it's going to be something that they're interested in learning about. I would say that. And then also just dealing with people, just being able to listen and delegate and collaborate, because I do think that events are massively collaborative. So I do feel like the theater sort of prepared me well.
Yeah, I hear you. And that's similar to how I got started in Web3 as well. A lot of people I talk to seem to have just fallen into it. I was still in consulting when I was asked to write this 5-page feature article about how blockchain was going to transform the world of asset management. And at the time, I had very little knowledge of what this whole blockchain stuff was about. And I had 2 weeks to put this article together. So I went to as many meetups as possible, the ones that would have me anyway. And I read up as much as I could in the space of 14 days and came up with this feature article. And from there, it was one Web3 role to another until where I am now. Yeah, it's good to see.
Trial by fire, I said. They just like throw you
Yeah.
in the deep end. I mean, 5 pages is no joke either. So you did.
Yeah. And following on from that, I'd like to say that you're a veteran in the Web3 event space now. Over the years, how has events in Web3 evolved from being such a nascent niche thing to where it is now, you know, commanding thousands of people to all come together to listen to one speaker talk about one subject?
It's funny, isn't it? Gosh, because I think back when I first started Crypto Mondays, I mean, it was me and like 3 guys, 3 men talking about Bitcoin. And that was it. No one really wanted to talk about anything else. That was the topic, was Bitcoin. And it was overwhelmingly male. Luckily, those are 2 things that have changed, if not completely, at least sufficiently. So definitely there's a lot more women in this space. And of course the topics and the subject matter have expanded beyond
Yeah.
Bitcoin. So I would say those are the two main things. Obviously, we still have a lot of work to do in terms of diversity. I know we'll probably like touch on that, but and even if you think, look, we're all early adopters in this space, but even 2017, when I first got into it, I mean, there are people who've been in it since 2012, 2013, 2015. So I've never felt like OG, although maybe I am a little bit, but yeah, I've never really.
Absolutely.
But so aside from the fact that I think that cryptocurrency and all of the related jargon has become much more mainstream in terms of just day-to-day people talking about it or reading an article in Newsweek or Vice or whatever. So it is just more prevalent everywhere. So that's part of it. But I also think the way that events are thrown, obviously Web3 events are very different from Web2 events. They're just a little bit more interactive, a little bit more engaging. And I think that's why people prefer them. At least I prefer them. But I think some of the trends, I mean, definitely gamification. I think everything's going to be gamified going forward. And you can already see that starting a little bit. And then also utilizing the sort of crypto tools, if you will, that we have with events. You've started to see this already, where you have sort of like NFT token gated communities and events and things like that. And I think that will become more popular as well as time goes on. Although I have reservations about that, because I think when you've got brand new people trying to attend it, like you just said yourself, you went to any of the events that you could when you were trying to learn. And I do. And so I worry that something like that could be a barrier to entry. So yeah, I think, but I definitely see that happening more as time goes on.
Yeah. And do you see the Web3ification of events spilling into Web2 and into even events that have nothing to do with technology related topics?
I don't attend a lot of those events, so it's a little bit, to be fair, so it's a little bit difficult for me to say. However, I have attended quite a few cloud events, as in Web2 cloud. So you're talking sort of like the infrastructure. And no, I haven't really seen. I would love to see more Web3 elements spilling into it, but they're still very lots of men in suits. You do still occasionally, especially at the gaming conferences, get like the women dressed up, standing around, acting as hostess, things like that I think are very problematic, that we don't wish to see in Web3, but are still sort of taking place in the Web2. So I would say not enough of the Web3 is spilling into it.
Yeah, I think there is still hope. I think we can teach them a thing or two about diversity, about respect. Yeah, I think we can.
Absolutely. And I think one of the biggest, starkest differences between Web2 and Web3 is that the engagement that the audience has. And this is very true if you look at even like communities as well. Like if you're looking at sort of Web2, this idea that the product comes first and the community follows, where in Web3, community kind of comes first and the community can feedback about the product and give.
That's right.
And so that part of it, I definitely think you see spilling over into events themselves, as in people want to engage with the product. They don't just want the demo. They want to use it, or they want to see it, and they want to be incentivized to do so. And that makes for much more dynamic and interesting interactions between people, in my view.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up. I'm really glad you brought that up because my last guest also mentioned that community is in the heart of Web3, and she works in marketing. It's important to make that a distinction from Web2, where the community is essentially the product, but in Web3, the community is driving the product. Yeah, so thanks for bringing that up
Yeah,
because I think it solidifies it in the minds of our listeners that this is different. We're not using the old rules for a new game.
completely. And I think it makes for a better product. And when people feel like they have skin in the game, I mean, I had never seen anything like it in terms of
Yeah.
my first encountering like Web3 community. I mean, they were demanding and they were and they were difficult, but they could be because they literally had put money into the company. So it was,
Yeah.
again, going back to accessibility, which is a big thing for me at Crypto Mondays, letting the average person be able to be involved, in the evolution of a product or a project.
Yeah. Yeah. And in terms of censorship at your events, how are you dealing with this? Is this something that you have to deal with? We just saw that last week the regulator sentenced CZ of Binance to a few months in prison for illegal trades or for facilitating illegal trades, to be more specific. Is censorship something that you have to deal with when it comes to making sure that the truth comes out at your events?
It's a really interesting question. No, it's not something that I've had to deal with directly, I suppose. That for the most part, we stay on topic, right? So if you're talking about macro influences on the market, for example, and so maybe there's two wars going on at the moment, right? So like maybe that gets touched on. I don't think I've ever had anybody like go deeply into it and get super political while on stage at an event, touch wood. But if it did, I mean, if it wasn't immediately relevant to the topic at hand, I probably would shut it down or just say, you know what, save it for the networking session, because I do truly believe people can say whatever they want. I'm a big believer in that. But when you're on stage, I do feel like there's a responsibility there. So yeah, but in terms of censorship, I've never had to do it, luckily, as I say, and I would be loath to do so, but it just would depend on the context of the scenario.
Now, I've got a confession to make. The novelty of working from home has slowly started to wear off. When I want some flexibility in my workspace arrangements, I head to WeWork. Join the vibrant community at WeWork and enjoy 1 month free on new memberships. This is perfect for professionals in the AI and Web3 space. Their flexible workspaces offer the ideal environment for collaboration and growth. Don't miss out. Claim your free month at WeWork today by clicking on the link below my YouTube videos or simply heading to ademalajo.com and navigating to the resource section.
Yeah, very well put. And to segue into something a bit different, but still connected, can you comment on the role of ethics when you're selecting journalists, and tell me about how you balance getting sponsored content compared to having organic content?
So, well, so City AM, I think this is for most newspapers, but I could be wrong. But I know City AM for sure. Any sponsored content has to be labeled as such. It has to be clearly labeled as sponsored content. So I do think that goes a long way in readers knowing that the information that they're reading is not objective, And for me, and this goes for events as well as journalism. I mean, you get pay to play, and I think that's very common. I tend to avoid that personally. Just when I'm choosing speakers, I tend to look at who is best thought leader on that particular topic, as opposed to who's offering to pay me the most money. But that's because I am always trying, like my sort of guiding star in all of this is always the community. So I'm always thinking in terms of what benefits the community and what's best for them. And what's best for them isn't necessarily the person who's paying me the most money. So that has never failed me in terms of making choices. But I mean, look, I don't judge. There are a lot of really reputable, well-respected events and conferences and newspapers that it is all pay to play, I mean, it's a business at the end of the day. well. So I think it's kind of like striking a balance. But for me, I
Hmm.
appreciate that we have to label anything that's sponsored as such. And then I choose to try to fill my section of the newspaper with articles that are written by people who care about the readers, that care about, that they want facts, they want information, they want to make
Hmm.
their own decision based on those facts, and to be a platform for that. That was very important to me,
Yeah,
the integrity of it.
exactly. And to get nerdy and quote Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that.
Yeah, and you're you're wielding your sword with a lot of responsibility.
I tried to.
Thank you, thank you. And also connected to this, like you mentioned with sponsorship, I also know that you have a roster of companies who sponsor your events. Are there checks that you have to do to make sure that you're getting the most ethical sponsors on board, or how does that all work?
That is because I've been burned in the past. I mean, it's one
Yeah.
of those things where you work in the Web3 space and you tell everybody, like, don't write down your seed phrase, don't do your own research,
Mm.
do these things. And then actually in the moment, you
Yeah.
don't do it. So I hold my hand up. I've
Mm.
absolutely been that person. So, I had a sponsor a couple years back who just never paid us. And then as I started
Mm.
to dig more and more into that, which I should have done in the first place, but I knew them. So I thought, it was okay. And the more I dug into it, the more I realized that this person didn't pay anybody. And it was a sort of
Mm.
long-standing issue. So, yeah, I mean, when we are
Wow.
approached by companies, I absolutely do my research. So I will ask one of my colleagues to also do some research. So you've got kind of
Mhm.
two people doing it rather than just one who may have, preconceived ideas about the people or the company. So that keeps it fair. And then I really do just dig into their standing and what their community is doing, what their community is saying. I go into
Mhm.
the Telegram. I obviously check out all the websites and Coinbase and everything else.
Yeah.
Coinbase, is that the one I'm thinking of? Yeah, but I do the research. But yeah, and I do that because I've gotten burned. But I think any of us
Yeah.
working in the Web3 space in one form or another probably has
Yeah.
gotten burned. So
100%.
yeah, I try not to give myself too hard of a time about it.
Yeah.
Chalk it up to a lesson learned, but
Mhm.
yes, I think doing research about the company and making sure that this is something that you want to align yourself with, because it works both ways. I will say that I'm also
Yeah.
in the very privileged position right now that I can be a little bit choosy about sponsors. But
Yeah.
back when we first started, I would have said yes to anything, and I think that's very
Yeah.
common. So
Exactly.
yeah, it's a tough one, but you don't want to align your brand with questionable
Mm.
with questionable companies and questionable people, especially in this space that is
Yeah.
so scrutinized already, because of
Mhm.
scams and everything else, because of a few bad actors. So I really want people to know when they're coming to Crypto Mondays, like, they're not going to get shilled to by someone
Yeah.
that's yeah, like, not reputable.
Exactly. I know far too well about getting burned as well.
We've all got
Back
stories, don't
in
we?
back in yeah, yeah, back in 2018, I came on board as an advisor for this pre-ICO project, who went on to raise about $40 million, and then they vanished. And for about 6 months, I had angry people getting in touch with me via LinkedIn, via Telegram. Where's my money? This was a scam. We're coming for you. It was not a great time.
No, and this was the 2018, for those of us who know, the ICO heyday. I also was involved in an ICO that
Yeah.
raised significantly less. I think ours was about $2 or $3 million. Yeah, where's the product? So my CEO disappeared, just completely disappeared, left the country. And yes, I got
Mm.
plenty of messages. So yeah, I get it. It's Those were some crazy times. And when I think back then, I mean, there was just absolutely no regulation whatsoever. And I think that people were just so
None.
excited to get involved in this brand new, seemingly extremely lucrative industry. A lot of those sort of
Hmm.
checks and balances and DYOR kind of went out the window.
Oh, well, it's good we've all learned from experience. And these days, are there any directives that you have to take into account when you're hosting these events?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, because a lot of what we do is we promote our sponsors. And in some cases, our sponsors, we have a couple of exchanges who are sponsors. So as you know, you have to be very careful about the language that you use. So I tend to ask the sponsor, who usually has a bigger team than we do, to, do their in-house legal checks first and foremost. But yeah, I have accidentally put stuff up. I'm not going to pretend that I'm perfectly across all of the regulations. I'm not. I try to be, but as anyone will tell you, it's a lot of acronyms and a lot of information that I think to some extent, hot take, is intentionally convoluted because
100%.
yeah, and God forbid you're not a native English speaker. I mean,
Oh,
so, and that is a whole other conversation, and I find that very problematic too. But this is also why in the newspaper once a month I have an article that's all about regulation, and I try to have it written in a way that's anyone can understand it. And I also try to list, because very often there are, I forget the name of it, but they're like town halls basically where you can come together and you can have a dialogue with the policymakers and the stakeholders in the space, and they are not very well advertised. So I think that most people don't even know that they exist, which I also find sus. So I always try and make sure to print all the information, everything in the digital version, including link throughs where you can find those town halls, those meetings, because I think we as in us stakeholders in the space, we have to be more involved. We have to. So otherwise, what's happening in the US will inevitably happen here.
Yeah. And on the topic of making sure that you're looking out for your stakeholders, for your audience, when it comes to ensuring that you have diverse voices, how are you going about this?
Great question. I love this question. I feel like diversity is super, super important. I'm a woman in this space, and I am a founder and a leader. So I don't try, I do. I employ in top level positions women and non-white people. And then I also ensure that when I am curating panels, and the same goes from the newspaper, putting things together, that I have female voices and voices of color, if you will, on the stage and in writing for the newspaper. So I mean that's sort of leading by example, I suppose. And then we partner with and try to support other initiatives that are specifically dealing with these types of things. Like Women in Blockchain Talks, for example, is a great one. And that is a community partner of Crypto Mondays. And that is led by Lavinia Osborne, who is a woman of color. And she is very outspoken about all the various aspects of that. And so we support them. We are not just for women, but we want to support initiatives that are. And I think that's really important. And I think that's something that other companies should be doing, because look, nowadays it's 2024. Nearly all Web3 companies have women working for them. But how many Web3 companies have women working for them in positions of authority in the C-suite? That to me is what I'm pushing for now. So it's and not just that, but retaining them, paying them appropriately, incentivizing them. So because I still see plenty of manels, at events, which I find disheartening. There's just no reason for it. And I know for us at Crypto Money, we will never have that. I'm actually in the middle of putting together a panel now about DPIN, and there are not very many women speakers, at least that I can find. I'm searching desperately, but I will never put a bunch of men on the stage. I just won't do it. So I definitely think that this is something that other events and conferences should be trying to do, and certainly companies in terms of their hiring and maintaining.
Yeah, 100%. I really like how you're working so to make sure that the ethos of Web3 and crypto is reflected in your events. At the end of the day, it's about making sure that we reach the 99% who have been locked out for so long. And Kaitlin, you're such a font of wisdom, and with all the experience that you've gathered over the years, what would you say to someone who is looking to get into Web3 events as a career?
As in hosting them, or working for companies as a Web3 events manager, or both, or?
Yeah, let's go with both.
Because I do think there is a difference. Because I think when you are hosting your own meetups or your own events, or you're starting from nothing, I always sort of give the advice to start local, ask for help, and be consistent. So I think starting local is really important because especially if you're starting with no money, you probably have a ton of resources at your disposal locally that you're unaware of. So some of it is just being conscious of your surroundings and then going out and asking for help from other pre-existing communities or people in the space, or even just a pub down the street that might have a spare room one night that you could host a meeting in, So I think all of those things, and then consistency. And the consistency is the one thing that also I think carries over when you are an event manager for a company. I think a lot of times when companies are leaning out, say in bear markets and things like that, the marketing team is usually one of the first things to go. Which, look, I do understand. You can't, there's no point in having a marketing team if you don't have a product. So you've got to prioritize. I understand that, but I do think that events are so important in terms of marketing, in terms of doing business, that I think sometimes they get sort of relegated, to the back heap, if you will. And I actually think they're one of the most important things that you can do for your brand. Because let's say that you're attending conferences, even if you don't have the money to have a big presence at that conference, even just coming in with your team and your t-shirts and attending side event, you don't have to go to the main conference. Go to side events, talk to people about what you do. That face-to-face interaction, that networking, like you really can't put a price on it. And it's really hard to quantify as well, because one of the number one things I get asked a lot as an events manager is, what's the ROI? And like, how do you track, what's your metric for success? And it's like, how do you track eyeballs on a brand? How do you track conversations and word of mouth? It's really, really difficult. But I genuinely find that it's the best way, because if you hear about a company from your mate, who's like, oh, this company is amazing, you should definitely check them out. How much more likely are you to do that than if you see an ad on YouTube? So I just really think those things are like priceless. You can't put a number or an amount on it, but they're so important for lending legitimacy to the brand. And so I just think events, and obviously I'm a big lover of events because of the person to person connection. I get asked a lot about like virtual events and stuff like that. And I think virtual events are brilliant on the one hand because they eliminate the geographical barrier, right? But I think that in-person events, I mean, you can't duplicate the energy exchange between humans.
No. 100%. Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with everything you said. Yeah, and yes, for anyone who's just starting out, don't do anything crazy. Just start with the resources that you have at your disposal. And for companies that are already up and running, just like you said, it's important to have a marketing team, because you may have the most amazing product, but if no one knows about it, then there's absolutely no point. Kaitlin, that's all we have time for this session, but I want to thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you being on this episode, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Ade. This is brilliant, and thank you so much for having me. It was just a joy to chat with you.